let's talk a little bit about why the Raiders did what they did. Okay, so this year I looked for a team to try to get in their draft room. It's always a fun thing. It's insightful. By the time you get to Monday, I think the last thing you want to read is another sports writer reviewing who had good drafts and blah, blah, blah. So I try to get in draft rooms. Sometimes it works. I got turned down by 3 teams this year. And then luckily, thanks to the Raiders, to Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler and Mark Davis, even though I don't know if Davis was involved in this at all. Thank them for letting me in their room to basically get a peek behind the curtain. And I'll explain to you a little bit about why I thought the Raiders were interesting. This is year 2 of Ziegler McDaniels. They had a bad year last year. They lost their quarterback. Things did not go well. And so now this is a big, big draft. When they drafted Tyree Wilson, that is an important pick for them. And I'll get back to the Raiders in a second, but I'll tell you, I had intended, after doing the Raiders on that first night, to go to Detroit to see the Lions after round 3 on Friday. This is a team that was scheduled to have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds, including 6 and 18. And I thought, this is going to be a really, really interesting team. And don't get me wrong, the Lions are very interesting, and I think they're a really interesting Super Bowl dark horse pick. But after CJ Stroud happened, I talked to our friend and boss, Matt Casey at NBC about, what about the Texans? And he was very bullish on me switching my plans and getting up and going to Houston instead of Detroit. So that's what I did. I went to Houston, spent a couple hours at their facility, spent time with Nick Caserio, with CJ Stroud, and basically just tried to get a feel of what happened with them. We'll talk about that a bit. And then I decided, since, of course, the Houston Astros were in town to play the Phillies, I decided I'm going to go watch 3 or 4 innings. So I watched the first 4 innings of the Houston-Philadelphia game, then went back to my hotel room and watched pretty much all of round 3, got on the phone a little bit, and then got up pretty early on Saturday morning and flew home. And I've been here at my home in Brooklyn since about mid-afternoon Saturday. We record this late Sunday night. I am, 500 words away from being finished with the column, which I'll do as soon as we get off here. And the reason we wanted to do this and wanted to do the podcast right now is that, first of all, by the time, if we did this at a normal time, like midday Tuesday, or put it out midday Tuesday, the draft is already, the first round is 5 days old. We thought, let's just hit everything and do it and put the link in Football Morning in America. So people, if they want to, when they wake up Monday morning on their way into work, they can listen to this. They can certainly read the column if they choose. So that is what I did this weekend. And I just simply wanted to explain what went into my thought process about doing the Raiders and then doing the Texans. So, Miles, a couple of things about the Raiders. People are going to say, well, geez, what exactly happened with the Raiders and why did they pick Tyree Wilson? So I'm walking through the facility midday Thursday, and Josh McDaniels, I'm going to Dave Ziegler's office, the GM. And Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler sit down in his office, and this is like their last pre-draft meeting. And McDaniels, they had just finished 3 months of work. They finished stacking their board all the way down through 7 rounds late on or midday Wednesday. So they were done. They were all the hay was in the barn, so to speak, and they were ready to go. And McDaniels is sitting on a couch in the office of Dave Ziegler. Ziegler, 47 years old, McDaniels, 45. Even though Mark Davis said to me at one point, I didn't bring these guys in to be basically Patriots West. I brought them in because I thought they were really smart football people. Anyway, Josh McDaniels says to, just out of the clear blue sky, he says to Dave Ziegler, you know what we need? We need 3 quarterbacks to be picked in the top 6. So they go back and forth. And so we leave there and I say to McDaniels, what are you talking about? Why do you need 3 quarterbacks to go? And he said, we've basically got 4 players, non-quarterbacks, who are very, very close with their grades. It's almost a pick 'em, basically, with their grades between the offensive tackle at Ohio State, Paris Johnson, between the cornerback from Illinois, Devin Witherspoon, and between the 2 edge players, 2 defensive ends. Obviously, Tyree Wilson of Texas Tech and Will Anderson of Alabama. So they had finished talking and now they were going to go their separate ways before the draft. But the one thing that hit me is I said, man, I think 3 quarterbacks are going to get picked in the top 6. And so they go into the draft that night, and fast forward a little bit. They go into the room and obviously Bryce Young goes first. CJ Stroud goes second. Then it's Willie Anderson third. And here come the Colts. And everybody thinks this is where Will Levis goes. But honestly, the Raiders did not care whether it was Will Levis or Anthony Richardson.
Right.
They didn't care at all. They just wanted it to be one of those 2 guys. And when Anthony Richardson was announced as the pick in the room, Josh McDaniels got a huge grin on his face, and he and Dave Ziegler come up next to each other, slap hands, and are both thrilled, because this means that no matter what happens at 5 and 6, it means that they will get one of their 4 players at number 7, one of their 4 desired players. So obviously Witherspoon goes 5, and Paris Johnson, who I believe would have been the pick. The Raiders wouldn't tell me. I believe he would have been the pick at 7. But anyway, so Paris Johnson goes 6. And then obviously Tyree Wilson becomes the pick of the Las Vegas Raiders. But 2 interesting points about this. So right before this happened, right before, when they are still unsure of how exactly this is going to go, you've got Dave Ziegler on the phone with Monty Ossenfort, the general manager of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, remember, the Cardinals had gone down to number 12. And now the Cardinals were talking to teams above them, trying to figure out, we want to trade back up. So Ossenfort is on the phone with Dave Ziegler. But understand one thing, Miles. Dave Ziegler is, Monty Ossenfort knows that Ziegler might be picking Paris Johnson. That's the player they want. So in other words, although Monty Ossenfort is setting some groundwork, if Paris Johnson, if Detroit doesn't trade and Paris Johnson is still on the board at number 7, if they're setting groundwork for that, there was this feeling in the room that even though in the Raiders room, that even though they were talking to Monty Ossenfort, that if Monty Ossenfort wants Paris Johnson, he's probably not going to get him if he has to trade with the Raiders, because the Raiders, I think, wanted him too. So that was a little bit of a cat and mouse game that was really kind of fun. But anyway, so that's sort of what I thought about that place. It was funny. At the end of the evening, the Raiders were trying, not feverishly by any stretch, but they made a couple of phone calls. At the end of the first round or high in the second, they wanted to get Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. So they talked to a couple of teams, and then they talked to Kansas City, and Kansas City gave them such a bad, lopsided offer in favor of Kansas City that, Ziegler just gets off the phone and he said, "We're not doing that." And there's a little part of their room, a big board that analyzes with point totals on it, because everybody now uses draft trade value charts. And
Yes.
It was very lopsided in Kansas City's favor. So they weren't going to do it. It ended up that they, with the fourth pick of the third round or of the second round on Friday, they ended up trading up and getting Michael Mayer, who I think will just step into either the starting job or 30 snaps a game at least at tight end with the Raiders. But anyway, that's a little bit of what I saw with the Raiders on Thursday night.
What's interesting to me, Peter, is that it seems like the Raiders were very off of quarterback. And I don't know that everyone would have thought that heading into this draft, just based on the fact that they had Jimmy Garoppolo, sure. But, if one of those guys maybe would have fallen, it doesn't seem like that's something that was really a consideration. They had those 4 non-quarterbacks, and those were the guys that they were targeting, and those were the guys that they figured that they really wanted. And, when you see them that they then pick a developmental guy, more later in the on day 3, then I guess that all kind of comes together and it makes sense.
There was one other little fun note, sort of an inside football note that I haven't seen before, but, I'm sure in this modern era of football where everyone is concerned how they look publicly. About 45 minutes after picking Tyree Wilson, the Raiders, a few of their guys went out to either get a bite to eat or do a little research or to do whatever. But McDaniels went back to his office. He was going to have his first extended conversation now with Tyree Wilson. So his football ops guy, a guy named Tom Jones, gets Tyree Wilson on the phone, gives McDaniels the phone, and basically Josh McDaniels said, "Hey, so excited you're a Raider. You're going to help us win a lot of games and all that." And he goes, "But I want to touch base on a few things." And I'll read you what I wrote in my column. He goes, "Just want to touch base on a few things. You're going to talk to the media." This is Josh McDaniels talking to Tyree Wilson. "I just want to touch base on a few things. You're going to talk to media here in a bit, and I wanted to give you a few points to consider. Be humble, which you are. Stay away from predictions. That way you won't have to eat them later. Don't talk about timelines with your foot." Everybody knows probably that Tyree Wilson had foot surgery last November. He's doing fine and probably will be back ready to go at the start of training camp.
He didn't stay away from the timelines with his foot, though, because he told the media right after that he should be back by training camp.
Don't talk about timelines with your foot.
Whoops. And then he did it.
You don't want your draft story to be all about your foot. Now, you got a fan base that's second to none. They're going to love you. Just express how excited you are, which I know you are. And so that was something I hadn't seen before, sort of, the first extended conversation that McDaniels had with him. There was a big chunk of it about media training, and just, say the right things, which most players do in their opening press conference with a team.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.